All right, I'm joined here today by a very special guest for episode 41 of the Lucas Grandsire podcast. It is, of course, Markelle Martin, who, if I could spend 10 minutes just trying to introduce you from everything you've done, everything you currently do. But here's the highlights, right? You had The Bachelor, worked for the UFC, work as a manager for CAA with some of the biggest athletes in the world. But Markelle, thank you for joining me. How are you?
Man, what's up, Lucas? Appreciate you having me on, man.
Of course. The funny thing is when I asked you to come on the show, my thought is, you're a high level MMA manager. We're gonna have all this stuff to talk about, and I had people around me saying, "Oh, from The Bachelor." It's like what? It's like what are you guys
Exactly.
talking? I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then everybody starts going on their phone like, from The Bachelor. I was like, "Wow!" So you've really done just about everything you can think of.
Yeah, it's funny. And I don't mind it, right? It's kind of funny, especially being in the MMA world, right? But like we're so used as a society, like Googling people. So
Yeah.
obviously that's gonna come up first, right? Which doesn't do me a much of a service in the MMA world. Some would say, but yeah, it was a part of my life that was amazing. It was a blessing of an experience. Actually, Dana White bought me my very first suit to go on there,
Oh,
which was cool. I was working at the UFC when I got hit up by the Bachelorette, and so that was an amazing experience, man. So yeah, I kind of I subscribe to just serendipity, right, in life. Like I didn't set out to be a MMA fighter and or a coach or even a manager for that instance, right? Like I grew up playing football and ran track most of my life, or pretty much just being an athlete. And I went to school at UNLV, so I did my undergrad there, and I got my master's degree from UNLV, and I played football there. Had a ton of injuries, and the only sport at the time, right, in Las Vegas was UFC. So that's kind of how I got my start in the MMA world. I literally just got my master's in sports management, wanted to be into a sport, get into a sport. I met an executive there and was there from 2011 to 2016.
so was it kind of a conflict of interest? I want to say that you used to work for the UFC. Now you're negotiating, I would say, against or with the UFC, right? I think some people kind of look at it like that would be a little bit odd.
No, you know what? It's actually the opposite because in one respect, right, it favors me because I understand the UFC business much more. I would say, I would argue, rightfully so, than some of my counterparts, right, in the industry. Just because, right, like I helped, you know what I mean, make that place money, right? Like I understand the business inside and out from a pay-per-view structure, from a sponsorship. So I did sponsorship sales. So all the logos on the mats that you see, I was an integral part of that and that whole team. So I understand like how that kind of money flow works and all the different revenue streams of the business. So when we got bought out for $4 billion, I got laid off, right? Not
Oh.
it wasn't necessarily my fault or any of the other 100 or so people that got laid off back in 2016. It was because WME purchased UFC, and they already had my position, a person that did what I did, so they didn't need me. So I would probably arguably still be at the UFC today, working there, had not I've been laid off. But no harm, no foul. Like it was a blessing to be there, and it was a cool experience working for arguably one of the best leagues and promotions in the world. I learned a lot because it was only 300 of us working at the UFC at the time. So I always hang my hat on that experience. And then I got a random phone call from CAA, and that's where I've been ever since. And that's been another serendipitous moment in my life.
CAA's got to be pretty cool because it's beyond like, and that's not to say anything bad about other management, but some of them it's MMA specific and stuff like that. With CAA, it's like, we're talking about getting guys into movies. Some people talk about book deals. Like CAA, that's like a gigantic thing. Even what they're doing with basketball, that must have been surreal for a moment to be like, wait, sometimes you've never heard of the place, but you're excited for it. But CAA, it's like, wait, this is real. This is a big thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I tell this story all the time. It's like my very first day. No, actually, not even my first day working there. My first interview with CA. I drove from Vegas to LA in Century City. They're on Avenue of the Stars, and people know it. Call it like the Death Star. But I just remember taking a photo of the lobby because the lobby is just like breathtaking. You see all these people in suits, and it's like marble staircases, it's like all this beautiful art. And I remember sending that picture to my parents, like, "Hey, this place is like a fancy place. I think they do more than just sports representation." Because I never like, again, I'm not a big like Google person, Google before you meet them kind of person, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't find out until after my interview like how big CA was, right? I didn't know that they were the biggest sports and entertainment agency like in the world, and who they represent and how they do business. So I'm very fortunate. I tell people like I'm no better, no worse than you know anyone else in this game or trying to make a positive impact. But I will say that the difference of your quote unquote like MMA management house that is built for that, that's how they do their day to day. It's different at a level like a CAA, for a variety of reasons. So that's afforded me like a different kind of learning and a different kind of like expertise, I would say, right? And just seeing like how my peers move, seeing what the sports industry is, right? Like UFC, put it in this instance, UFC is not competing with a Bellator or other promotions. You know who they're competing with? Other sports leagues. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
like when we're out there, when I would work at UFC, I was not selling, sponsors and brands saying, "Hey, we're UFC, we're better than Bellator or we're better than one championship." Like, no, we were competing against, "Hey, we have a better age demographic, and fan base than the NFL, the NBA, the NHL." Right? Like that is how, and that's why I try to like educate some people, but I'm getting at a point where now it's just like beating a dead horse, but it's just different, like that's how the UFC is making their money. You think they're valued at $4 billion or I mean, I guess like 6 or 7 billion now today by comping against other MMA? No, they're comping against the real players. So why would that be any different for sports representation side, right? Or the athlete side? How would that be any different than comping against what they're comping against? So you can make it apples to apples. So you think that they're getting ESPN broadcast deals by saying, "Hey, we do more viewership than Bellator"? Fuck no. they're saying they're
That's
saying
fair. Yeah.
they're saying, "Hey, ESPN, look at our demographic, male 18 to 34. Like we crush it here. Here's how long they stay on digital, more so than this, that, and the other." And they're comping against other rights holders. You know what I mean? So I can talk about this all day long, but yeah, where it hasn't served me is, because of where I'm at, CAA, and because who owns UFC, WME, they're bitter rivals,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So they know the business and they know we know the business. So when it comes on that, it's like kind of stepping on toes because they're like, "Hey, we're not used to getting these kind of questions asked about our contracts or this kind of hard, actually uh, hard negotiating from a rep standpoint." So yeah.
I am curious a little bit more about the negotiation side, which I know there's only so much you can reveal, but it sounds like CAA and the UFC and Dana White have butted heads a lot, which a lot of people have said that's a good thing because it shows that you're willing to push back and stuff like that. How is that for you? Because I assume you used to work for them. Now you're negotiating against them. What can you kind of tell us about all that stuff?
Yeah, first it's so funny. Like I quickly learned that Dana White, if you know him, if you work for him, if you're friends with him, like he's one of the best individuals that you'll meet. Super generous, nice, good family, all that good stuff. But on the business side, like, and I'm not afraid, like he's an absolute animal. You know what I mean? But you got to look at his track record and what he's done to get UFC to this point alongside Lorenzo Fertitta, who I also worked with, and you kind of like it is what it is, right? It's that business side. So we're definitely not friends on that side,
Yeah.
and but I like to think that there's some level of respect there, even if to the social media world doesn't like really see it. But I think it's because of the fact that, when it comes to a CAA and how we represent our clients, I, I'll break down this definition. There's a difference between advising, right? And actually like negotiating and representing your client, right? As an agent, regardless of the sport, your job is to represent your client without thinking about the rest of your clientele or your bottom line, because that's not fair to the client. Real representation, in my opinion, and you would ask any real agent or expert in the space, right? You can't look at it as like a package deal, right? Like I can't represent Francis Ngannou and be thinking about how that may affect my other fighters or whatever. I have to represent Francis as an isolated entity in space and do what's best for the client without regard to myself, even at some times, right? And people are like, hey, you should just be independent, you should do your own thing. And I can be my own manager, right? Like that's easy to do, right? It doesn't take, even though like in any other sport, typically you have to take a test, right? You have to, for the most part, have a master's degree, which I have, and which I can do like easily because my background in schooling and my knowledge base. But to MMA, I mean, my eighth grade gym teacher could be an MMA manager today. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't fucking really matter, right? There's no like barrier to entry. So when I describe like why I stay at CA versus being independent, it's because fundamentally, right? Like if I'm just an independent manager, right, and I'm uh I am my own business, right? What that actually does, in my opinion, and people, your audience is free to kind of challenge this, but it puts you in a tough spot because now if you represent, let's say, 20 fighters or whatever, and you try to hardball and negotiate on one of your fighters' behalf, right, against the UFC. Now, we know how the UFC operates and does business, and some people love them, some people hate them, some people are in the middle, whatever. But let's just call it what it is. You know, if you are to push that envelope for that one fighter, it can affect the rest of the 19 fighters, right? And by and large, then that can affect me or that manager's bottom line, right? So it's like counterintuitive, right? Because it puts that manager in a tough spot because, like, shoot, if I don't say yes, or if I don't do this, or if I don't play ball, right, the right way with the UFC, then I'm jeopardizing my client. My client may be mad at me, and therefore I may not be able to keep the lights on at my own house. So let me go ahead and just do this or do that. But where the difference is, or again, why I say it is because I don't have so much of that pressure, right? Because I'm salaried, because I'm backed by a agency that knows the business, understand the business, and they believe and support me. I'm backed by a ton of other agents and team. Like it's not just me managing, right? It's not just me repping. Like all of our, like that's how we represent our clients, and it's just different from that. So that fundamental basis allows me the freedom to actually act on behalf of my client to the best of my abilities and use the resources from the CA ecosystem, right? Whereas if I were just independent manager, I may not have or be able to do because of just like the nature of the business.
So let me put you on the spot here with this question. This is for my
Yeah.
own curiosity, but who is your most difficult client to manage? And when I mean that, I mean like take for example like a John Jones who's unaffiliated, right? You
Hmm.
you would have to look at whoever manages him. They're gonna have their work cut out for them, whether it's negotiating with the UFC outside of the cage, whatever it is. Who would you look at out of all your clients and you're like, oh man, this guy's really testing my managerial skills?
Shoot, I would have to say Francis. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I say that because um and this is not a knock on Francis by any stretch. I would say because it made me, or he made me an even better agent, right? Because of his profile, right? Like I garnered to like, hey, you know, being an agent is not that hard. It's not rocket science. Again, we're not fucking coming up with vaccines, right? For COVID or whatever. But it's a relationship that you have to build, and it's trust that you have to form. And there's outside factors that you have to fight against. And it's such a balancing act, and it's such it's just a lot of work. Like it's I also share this all the time. Like, I didn't set out to be a manager or an agent in MMA. Like, it was just kind of serendipitous, right? Like, that's just the way my life has kind of unfolded to this point. And but I would I would not do it again, right? If I planned it out, like being an agent is such hard work. It's something that I feel like I'm naturally like good at and have like an affinity for, but people don't even see half of it, right? So when you ask the question like who's your most like difficult client, I look at it from a standpoint of like business, on what I know about what it takes to represent a client, right? To think about them 24/7, all of my clients, right? To, try to think backwards and forward and present at the same time, right? Trying to be, try to prepare, for any other factors, right? Whether it's people wanting to poach your client, right? It's whether it's people, or fans saying bad things about, how business is being done, or it's a or even the promotion themselves, right? Like, let's call it what it is. Do you think UFC likes me representing clients?
No.
I'm gonna ask you.
Nah,
Why?
I wouldn't think so because
Right.
you know too much.
Right. What else? Right.
I mean, you got the huge backing. I mean, there really is a lot of stuff where, you have a lot of power from where you're sitting.
Right. Because again, it, I guess like my own personal opinions of the fundamentals of business, right? They naturally, and I'm sure Dana White likes me as a person. You know what I mean? I would guess, because I never given him a reason not to. Right? I don't think he would buy, me my first suit way back in the day if he thought I was a piece of shit. Right?
That's fair.
But because, I'm a challenge, or can be difficult, because I separate the personal and isolate the business. Right now, it's a conflict if I stand in the way of their business model. Right, so I'm not a fan of like people have told me. It's so funny. Like, I've read comments on my Instagram. They're like, you shouldn't be having a public spat against Dana White. You're harming uh Francis's business. I'm like again, forgive me. I'm sure like a lot of MMA fans are watching the show there, and watch your show, and they probably hate me at this point. But like, as a collective, MMA audience is so far fucking gone when it comes to like understanding business. It's scary. For fans who watch these fighters and support these fighters and root for these fighters, for them to say, hey, by your manager or your agent trying to fight for what you are owed or deserve or should be having, you're harming their business. Like, it's fucking like, that right there is why I would tell people, like, be careful about wanting to jump into not only just agenting, but like agenting in this space, because it's just ass backwards, if you ask me. But I know I'm a minority, not just because like I'm black in this space, but like a minority from the standpoint of like again, I'm not better than or less than, but because of my perspective that I've been afforded by working at a place like CAA, I just look at things different and understand things. Like, I know what's true and I know what's false, like from a business standpoint. You know what I mean? And it's just sad to where like I'm sure I don't represent like most managers in the space. I don't fucking want to, but to each his own. We'll find out what happens.
Something I need to know about. We saw the famous video of Francis Ngannou walking right past Cyril. Cyril with the famous, why didn't he come say hello? The internet loved it.
Yeah.
Both men have kind of given their sides to the story, but from what I understand, were you there next to Francis? It just you weren't allowed to be a part of the movie they filmed?
Wait, you're talking about the hallway?
Yeah, the hallway. Because I believe somebody said that you
Yeah.
were with Francis at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah, 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 yeah. I was. We were walking in. We just got to the arena, and we're just walking back. And I remember, seeing and thinking to myself, I'm like, this is weird how the fighters are just out here like watching the fight because there was like a TV out there, and they were like just collectively hanging out in the hallway. And for those of you who know, like backstage, like that's you're either like in the locker room watching the TV, right, in the fights. But I'm not gonna sit in here and just like think about and contemplate on whether or not it was staged. It doesn't matter. But I remember passing, and once we passed them, Francis came up to me and was just like, "Hey, like that was awkward. I wanted to say hi to Serial, but I saw Fernan there, and that would have been even more awkward." And I'm like, "Yeah, that wasn't worth like any of that." But
Yeah.
of course, now that content like went viral, like if it was staged, that was brilliant by UFC. Like that's great for both fighters. Like I don't really care. But it wasn't like a bad Francis has no ill will towards Serial Gone. Zero. Zero. The coach, that's a different story and topic, and that's something that you would have to ask Francis about. But yeah, it was just because you know, you don't want to say hello to one person and then that other guy who you may not have a great relationship with is right there because that could have caused something.
The
Yeah.
thing too about that incident, at the website I work at, I have to write up all the news, so I wrote up about it, and I always try to add a little bit of insight if I can. But the thing is, there's a cultural thing too that I think people don't realize that in France, the hello is like the most important thing in the world. Like you cannot start a conversation with someone until you've looked at them in the eyes and said bonjour. It's like you have to unlock it. And
Ah,
so the
interesting.
thing is, where you hear Cyril Gann say like, "Oh, pourquoi il a pas dit bonjour?" That's just a French thing because in France, if you don't say hi to someone, it's like there's real beef. Like you look at that guy and you're like, "You're not even worth me looking at you." So I feel like part of a little bit of that drama too is a cultural thing. And Francis
Mm,
spent enough time in France, he knows. But I feel like that from the Cyril Gann camp could have made it even worse than what it already was because you saw the videos and the here's what Francis was thinking and here's what it
yeah,
means. But it's like there's another part of it too that people don't realize.
yeah. What's funny though? It's like being there and understanding like Francis' point of view, and then like hearing that like which is probably valid. I never spent time in France or anything, so culturally that would make sense. But no one has said why didn't Fernand and Serial say hi. Like
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
I've yet to see a report on that. Like if there's that, I would love to see it because if they're already there, right? And they clearly saw Francis.
Right.
I
You're
didn't
right.
see them,
That would be up to them to say hello since Francis is the one that can't. Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Definitely.
Right. I mean, they're already backstage, right? They're home. They're out, right outside their own locker room, right? We just happen to be like, passing by, right? I
That
don't know.
makes sense. So let me ask you this. So we see Cyril goes and does a bunch of interviews. I want to say like the week later, and he's like, I don't know. I thought we were cool and stuff. I believe you guys waited. I want to say it was like maybe 2-3 weeks until Francis kind of explained
Mhm.
from your perspective. Why wait that long? Why not just come out on Monday on the biggest show you can find and just be like, look, here's what happened. Francis isn't a bad person.
Oh, simple one because it wasn't that serious to us, but it just grew, and this narrative came out to where it's like, okay, yeah, now you have to address it. But it was nothing more than that. Like it wasn't like we were like once we passed and Francis, said to me as we were walking to our seats, it was like, yeah, I would have said hi to Serial, but it would have been awkward to say hi to Fernan. We didn't think about it or talk about it again. We were enjoying the fights, but so that was, I don't know, just an organic kind of timing. for us.
So for you as a manager, what do you do in that situation? Like you get on social media and everyone's like, "Oh, look at Francis. He's walking by, he's blinking people." Are you thinking in terms of his image? Like, okay, what can we do to, or is you said it's not that serious, but you mentioned the fans, they created this sort of thing around Francis that maybe he's not polite or whatever it is. Are you thinking in terms of his image when you see stuff like that?
With that, absolutely not, because right, him walking past someone and not acknowledging or saying hi, to the liking of the fans or his actual opponent, right? Like, make no mistake, like, why could the narrative be, hey, these fighters are focused and ready, right? They can be friends after the fight, right? As most fighters are, right? It's usually bad blood, right? And then after you fight, there's so much respect because that's what the sport is based on, right? And being martial arts and all, why can't it be that? So when it comes to like managing and agenting, like, from a PR perspective, that those are like the smallest like little things that you don't even care about, right? It's not like he's in jail, right? Or testing positive for some PED or doing this and doing that. Like that's when, as a manager, you need to worry about your client's image. You know what I mean? But my client's image, as it relates to Francis, he's a fighter, right? And he's focused, right? And if you really know Francis, I mean, he's just a good human being, right? And represents not only himself but an entire fucking continent. So the people that have some kind of harsh judgment after that, that's what I mean to tell you. Like, we're not worried about that. Like, they can go ahead and I don't know. They got bigger problems than Francis passing cereal by.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's fair. It definitely sounds like a nothing compared to what the entire internet was. Let me break down what his body language means. That Francis is clearly showing him that he's an alpha because of the way he's standing when he walks by. But it's like, nah, it's awkward, and I think nobody knows what to do in an awkward situation like that.
Yeah, it's weird, but it's what it is. It's fun. I think all in all, both sides benefited from it because they're gonna replay that when they promote the fight on ESPN. They're going to show that piece a million times. So that's a win for
So
both
you
parties.
you manage somebody a little bit complicated too in George St-Pierre, because I imagine with him,
Mhm.
when you're working with him, he's working on completely different things. I mean, we're seeing him in movies, we're seeing him
Yeah,
wear suits on podcasts and stuff like that.
right, right.
What does business with a George St-Pierre look like for you? Because I assume people, they'd be like, he's quote unquote retired. Like he doesn't need a manager.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. I'm glad you asked that. G is amazing. I love that dude. He's so like his fight IQ is just next level. And I said that because the last time I was with him, we were back in the green room, and it was Bass Rudin and Hoist Gracie, right before G went out, and this dude's asking Bass Rudin how he would defend calf kicks, and G's like literally still like being taught and like just being a student. So I just don't think G will ever completely disassociate himself with the sport of MMA, right? Because he's just a martial artist, like true, like the in its truest form. And now it's just about, he's a legend, as we know. Of course, there's like goat talk of Kamaru, and is goat talk of John Jones, all that stuff. And I'm not saying that those aren't warranted, but when it comes to like the numbers that G has and in the way and manner of which he did those, I just saw some meme and they're comping Kamaru, and I love Kamaru. I'm a big Kamaru fan, right? But they comped Kamaru's title defenses and then G's title defenses and the records of two. And I don't know if they're true. Somebody will have to fact check that. I don't spend enough time trying to fact check that, but it was like crazy. Like it wasn't like necessarily like neck and neck, And but people have short memories. Like this sport is an unforgiving sport, as we all know. And but G for G, it's about his legacy and continuing that on. He loves to act. He's very passionate at everything he does. And again, he's so smart that like even when it comes to his acting, like he takes it so seriously. Like he wants to get it perfect. And that's just what you love about G. So his is unlike some retired athletes that you may see that just like fall by the wayside. Like G is still in shape, still active, still staying relevant, and that's our job from a CA perspective. So, yeah, the naysayers that say he doesn't need representation, they also again just don't know shit about the business.
While we talk about the business, I'm curious about one thing, obviously because I'm in it, but how's your relationship as a manager with the media? Like, I assume for you, you must get blown up every day with people trying to get scoops, trying to get interviews and stuff like that. I'm curious, what can you tell us sort of about that relationship for you as a manager at a high level and specifically the MMA media?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question, and I'm laughing because I'm sure a lot of MMA media that may, you know, uh, they may find me difficult because I'm not very trusting, and me like I'm a very like I, at least I try to be a man of integrity and honesty. Like I don't like bullshit. Like me, I just try to lead with respect, right? Like that's why again the Dana thing. I don't have nothing personal against him, but he personally, right, tried to affect me, my business, and my livelihood, and defame me, right? And I don't care if you're Dana White. I don't care if you're Joe Biden, Donald Trump, like, or just some janitor on the street. Like I personally will never stand for that. You know what I mean? So like when I deal with like media, I always try to come from an angle of just respect. Like, hey, respect the athletes and respect their time and respect their wishes, and I'll respect you because I'm not only a reflection of my athlete, but I'm trying to do my best to protect them as well. And some media handle things or those questions differently. And I just wish that most media, and I'm not speaking for everyone, would really, you know, try to, I don't know, lead with integrity and respect as well. You know what I mean? But on the flip side of it, because again, I went to the Greenspun School of Media at UNLV, right? So I know at least something. I'm not just talking out of my ass, right? But when it comes to like just how they deal or portray certain athletes, I really find it like just disingenuous, and I really find it unfair because if they want to show any truth or light to something, then it's like, okay, let's also talk about the fact that you're blacklisted if you say anything bad about UFC, right? Like, why is there not enough on that, right? So like true journalism, right, for the fans, right? I think is very few and far between, and no one wants to talk about it. And I kind of don't blame them because that's their livelihood at the end of the day, right? I sit here before you able to kind of speak freely more so than some because one, UFC doesn't pay my checks, period, right? You know what I mean? And two, call it just my personality. Three, like I don't give a damn. Like I'm out here trying to do the best I can on behalf of my clients because that is my job. You know what I mean? And it's not my job to try to convince them to be my best friend. It's not my job to try to convince them that, hey, like, let's just do this and let's just do this and let's all kumbaya because they're not doing that. You know what I mean? They're not taking any less than what they're owed from ESPN. They're not taking any less than what they're owed from sponsors that pay them. They're not taking any less from anything that they have earned. You know what I mean? So again, just circling back to media, like I try to take it on a case by case scenario, but I'm always very like cautious because like I know what perspective that they're leading with. They're leading with this perspective of, hey, let's promote the fight, let's favor UFC, right? And then, of course, we want to share some thoughts on the fighter, but no one wants to bring up that wall that or that line that they will not cross. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't
So
know,
so
Dan.
with you saying that, I'm curious, like, for
Yeah,
example, France is the big example because everybody's,
yeah,
Dana White hates negotiating with Francis, which is a good thing, as we're finding out on this podcast. It's a good
yeah.
thing. But like, were he to do a sit down interview, like when you say that, you'd want people to maybe push him a little bit on what's going on with the UFC business wise. Like, tell us your side, or what is it that you would sort of, hope that someone would cover with him?
Um, I wish someone, or more media would cover more aspects of the business on behalf of the fighter, or to inform the fans and the audience, right? Because they're able to report on these things because they have the various relationships, or they have a different vantage point. So either the fighters are less informed, or the fans are less informed. So I would love for them to ask questions about, sponsorship, right, and how fighters are impacted, right. I'll tell you, I'll give you a good insight to that, right. Why? Because I worked at UFC and did
Yeah,
sponsorship
right.
deals,
Yeah, exactly.
so I know how much uh you know what estimates. Well, now they're making way more money in sponsorship than we did, but I know how much I can estimate close to within a few million of how much they're making on an annual basis. I can estimate, pretty much what each individual logo on the broadcast on the canvas is making. And I can also tell you, because on this side, when UFC contacts and say, hey, we got a sponsorship deal for Francis or Khalil or so and so, and it's going to be, a couple grand or a couple of this or a couple of this, right? I get a bad rep of saying no all the fucking time because I'm like, yo, I know how much you guys are getting paid. Crypto.com, and it's public information, some of it, right? Crypto.com, right? Is how much is that deal? I think
So
it's like 17 mil a year, something like that. How
something like
much is
that.
it? Okay. So with that, part of the assets is, UFC fighters have to wear the jersey, right? Okay. You know how much value that is for a sponsor?
It's huge.
Hundreds of millions of dollars in exposure, right? Let's put it into context for like any fans that watch other sports other than MMA. Super Bowl commercials are famous, right? A 30-second spot just to have a commercial during the Super Bowl is millions of dollars for 30 seconds. For 30 seconds. Think about how many seconds, right, a UFC fighter is shown wearing crypto.com during it. And I have nothing against crypto.com. I love crypto, right? But as an agent, right, and you can hear like kind of the passion, I guess, or frustration, is like, yo, like I don't understand how fighters aren't more educated on this. It's either the manager's a collection of the manager's faults, it's a collection of the fighter's faults. It has to have some responsibility on UFC, and it has to be some responsibility on media. You know what I mean? But I just feel like, from my perspective, and again, I remember Dana saying this, right? Which I thought was very much defamation. It's just like, of character. It was like, oh, these guys don't know what the fuck they're talking about. He should seek new management. But I hear that he wasn't talking about me, so it's all good. But like, even fans like backing that,
Yeah.
right? That I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like, no, I don't talk much and often, but when I do, I will tell you whatever. You know what I mean? And better believe you can fact check me if you want. Like, I'll do that all day long because I don't have no falsehoods, to be worried about. I'm telling you the truth. When it's like the fighters are vastly underpaid, and people just think about, oh, it's just a function of fighter purse. No, you know how many ways there is to get paid. Sponsorship is just one of them. So it's just like, I wish media would speak on other aspects, or speak on behalf of the fighters sometimes, but I just don't think that they do. I think media wants to hear the stories. They want to hear the fight week. They want to talk about, the perceived conflict or this. They want to build. They want to be a part of the machine, and it's okay to be a part of the machine. But I don't feel like there's enough risk on the journalism or truth telling on the journalism side, and that makes me concerned about the future of the sport.
So speaking of which, I'm going to ask you this because it's something people have talked about a little bit, but how bad for the fighters was the uniform deal? We saw Reebok. Reebok was bad. Everybody thought Venom was going to show up and it was going to be better. It's literally the same. How are you as a manager looking at that? Because we saw John Jones go from Gatorade and Nike, which is, I mean, that's huge, to now it's like Venom, and the casual fans went from they kind of know Reebok, and now it's nobody knows who the Snake is.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think that because I was a part of that white space analysis for Reebok. Um, yeah, I did all the research and exposure of what Reebok was going to get and what they're going to pay. It was vastly a diff a difference, right? And when I had the UFC hat on, I didn't really care, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
to be honest, because I didn't have
Yeah.
nothing to do with the fighter's bottom line, because it's like church and state kind of thing, right? But now being on this side, I care as a manager, but there's not enough, of individuals that I know of, and maybe I just got my head in the clouds or something, but you know, not too many managers are going to speak out and say that, or their fighters are willing to say that, because again, there's like this unwritten rule of, play nice, play ball, and you'll be rewarded. Um, but I come from just a different kind of school of thought, and also on the personal side, it just bothers me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't anticipate being in this sport, you know, um, for decades, like some. I don't aspire to be, like, to be quite honest, because I don't see the path of change really. I'm trying to do, a little bit of change and hopefully spark a little bit of conversation or a little bit of thought. But yeah, that's just scratching the surface, this whole uniform deal.
Are you gearing up for? I assume the biggest negotiation for you is going to be that moment when Francis Ngannou's contract comes to an end. I assume that's the one where you got to come in, guns blazing, armor everywhere. Like, you got to have every Dana White weakness. Talk about this, talk about that. Like, I assume that's going to be like the negotiation of negotiations for you.
Yeah, I would say from a career standpoint, right? It's like I'd be lying if I would say that this is probably the biggest contract that I'll have to negotiate, right? Because he's such a high profile athlete, right? It's like, who is negotiating, on behalf of Muhammad Ali. That was probably stressful. Or Mike Tyson, that was probably stressful. Or, I mean, Rich Paul, I'm sure, like, his first deal with LeBron was probably super stressful. So that's just a part of the business that, like, I welcome. And I like that challenge, and I'm up for that challenge. And when I can, I wish we were in person so I can look you in the eye and just tell you that, like, there's not a single manager in MMA on this planet that has spent more time and effort thinking about one fucking contract in the history of the sport. Like, I'll just tell you flat out. But again, there's so much stacked against me and so much stacked against Francis, right? It's like, hey, if you're a betting person, the odds are in UFC's favor, right? Because it's built that way, it's designed that way. Like, again, I'm gonna be honest with you, but little old me, right? Like, there's a lot of other great managers in the space, and big managers and high profile managers, and I don't care to compete against them. I don't care to aspire to be them. Like, I just want to be me. Like I said earlier, like, I just want to do the best job that I can. And I'll tell you one thing, that not short of, unless they try to, do something to interfere, tortious interference, um, we'll be okay. Yeah. What I mean? That's kind of the only thing. It's like, there's probably people, like, could be fans, could be other managers, could be the UFC themselves, right? Like, from that standpoint, like I can't control what happens on that, right? I just know that there's a legal matter at play. Nothing. That's the only thing I would be concerned about. If there's real tortious interference. But again, there's no regulatory body that can, stop this. And but Francis, and I have a great relationship. He's like a brother to me. I'll do anything for my clients just because that's the kind of like individual that I try to be. I'm not perfect. I make a lot of fucking mistakes. You know what I mean? Me and Francis even talk about them. Like sometimes, I'm like, damn, I was too emotional on that, or oh, let's just relax and take a beat. But this contract, when his contract is up, I want him to be with UFC, right? Like people make this huge misconception it's all about free agency. It's all about taking your fighter elsewhere to make more money. No, like you can make good money with the UFC and get a ton of fucking exposure, right? Again, like there's no combat promotion that promotes better than UFC. However, I'll say the caveats to that is like you got to think about if they decide to shine that light on you or not. You see what I'm saying? I mean, look, there's countless of other fighters, right? Let's forget about Francis for a second, right? When Sean O'Malley won in the Contender Series, what happened? Right? He got the Snoop Dogg thing, which is cool. That went viral, but that could have easily phased out.
Yeah,
it was the machine of UFC, right? And you couple that with who Sean O'Malley is, and he leveraged it, was wise enough to leverage that and just roll with it, right? That he's so big now, right? Like, I mean, Hamzat Chimaev. In MMA world, he's massive. In the sports world, no one knows him. No one knows him. But who made him massive? UFC and the machine, right? But you'll have to ask yourself, media or fan or whatever, are they promoting Francis that way? Or are they could they be doing better? Should they be doing less? Are they overhyping Francis? Right? There was a day that I remember, Francis hits like a Mac,
Ford Escort.
Ford Escort. Yeah. Francis is right now. Francis hasn't been like inactive, right? Francis has been winning last time I checked. So what's the difference? Right? So it's just a function of terms. If the terms are good, again, I work. Let me also break this down for people. This is fucking. I hope you blast this out too to people to read or fucking see. Hope they don't shadow ban this. But it's like the agent, the manager, the representation. I work for my client. We work for the client, not the other way around. It's not how this business works. Again, Rich Paul works for LeBron. Period. You know what I mean? So if LeBron, right, if a Francis says no, then guess what the final answer is? No.
Fair enough.
I mean? I can say, hey, but I did all this data, I did all this research, we did this, we did this. This is what it looks like. At the end of the day, the client makes the decision. You know what I mean? And it's my job, it's our job as representation to put them in the best position to make the best decision for their career. You know what I mean? And that's where I feel like, as of today, I'm knocking on wood, Francis is in a position to do so, right? But of course, at the end of the day, he has to win. He has to win, and he has to be wanted and needed. But at the end of the day, I think Francis has such an amazing future ahead of him, and I'm just honored to kind of be a part of the ride, to be honest.
All right, so we are gonna have to let you go because you do have somewhere to be. But first,
Yeah.
before we wrap up, though, because I did promise we would talk about this, we didn't get a chance to. Real quick, NFTs. What is it? Why should people do it? Because I see you're an
Ah,
NFT guy. I see it
yeah,
everywhere. Just real quick, keeping an eye on the clock. But what's the
yeah,
deal
yeah.
with it,
All
and
good.
how are we gonna be rich?
All good. I got 5 minutes, so I got
Okay.
you. So was the part of the interview that I was waiting on. This is the fun part. NFTs, I love them. If you don't know about them, you got to get on it. I learned just by jumping into the fire when we did Francis's NFT because I was like adamant that this is going to be the future. And like I will say, I will I try to be as modest as possible, but I'm gonna take some credit and pat myself on the back. Like I know my shit when it comes to like business and strategy and like marketing, and I just knew NFTs were going to be massive. Ethereum was like $1,400. I'm like, dude, this is going to be crazy. I was like, Francis, just trust me on this. We're going to do this thing called an NFT, and I was like, I'll just I'll explain it all to you later. And needless to say, like he became the first UFC athlete to drop an NFT, which was great for us, right? And he's been doing crypto ever since. So like now you see kind of some fighters dipping in there, which is great, you know. But I always like to say like, hey, we started this shit in the UFC front. But NFTs, man, are going to change the game. UFC has some stuff underway, which again is another like different aspect that I'll talk about on another time. Atom Bomb Squad, shout out ABS. This is another NFT that I bought by Bobby Hundreds. Highly recommend that. But yeah, I collect NFTs, in my spare time. I love them. I just feel like not only for the art and the collectible aspect of it, but I just feel that athletes specifically will be able to leverage NFTs a lot better and have ownership of their IP. And if they're not careful, the leagues, the promotions, other spaces will do it, and then again it'll be another case of like, oh, fighter doesn't have equality or rights. So you heard it here that every fighter needs to be learning about crypto and NFTs. um you have any?
I have a little bit in Bitcoin. I got there when it was worth, I want to say like 30 something. Now obviously it's
Oh,
climbed, so
nice.
I'm pretty happy about that. But yeah, just
Good.
dabbling in it.
There you
Nothing
go.
too crazy yet.
There you go, man. Not financial advice,
No.
but get some exposure, get some Ethereum. I would get some Ethereum. I would get some Solana. Um, Atom Bomb Squad, because they're like a street wear brand that's like notable, especially in LA. Just a big brand. Like you can't go wrong with like betting with the NFT groups that have uh like in real life, as they call it, like business or IP. It's just strong. So
All right, there we go. No financial advice, but if people listen, maybe they make a little bit of money from one of the top managers. Listen, man, thank you so much for the time. This is amazing. I could pick your brain for hours. Just so much stuff
yeah,
I want to talk about, but I think we covered a lot of the important stuff. But thank you for coming on,
yeah.
man. I really appreciate it.
Lucas, appreciate it, man. Thanks for letting me rant and vent and have these conversations. I don't do them too often, but you're a good dude, and appreciate your listeners, whoever is tuning in, and just know that I try to stay behind the scenes and put the clients first, and I'm trying to do my best, man. So hopefully things will work out the way that they're supposed to, and we'll see some positive change.
All right, there we go. Thank you so
Appreciate you,
much.
brother.
Thank you so much, man. This was awesome, and hopefully everything works out. Good luck with the negotiations, and
Yeah,
hopefully we'll talk soon.
awesome. Thanks, brother. Talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Bye bye.
Bye.